Hello, I'm Gavin Horgan, Headmaster of Millfield School in Somerset, the largest co-educational boarding school in the UK. Welcome to the Millfield Way Podcast. Here, you'll hear from teachers, coaches and students from Millfield and Millfield Prep School. Millfield is traditionally different, and this is the Millfield Way.
Hello and welcome to this Millfield Way Podcast in conversation with Jonathan Ford. I'm delighted to be joined by Millfield Prep School's Head of ICT and Co-Curricular. So Jonathan, thanks for joining us. How have you been?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, looking forward to this experience.
So just to start off, could you tell us a bit about your background, kind of any previous role before Millfield Prep or university, etc.?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to go to Millfield for my schooling. So I did 3 years here at the prep school, called Eggley Hall in those days, and then 5 years at the senior school. And then following school, went to Crewe and Alsager College, which then became Manchester Metropolitan University to study business studies and information technology. First teaching post was in just outside Guildford, Cranmore Prep School, where I went in to actually set up an IT department and was also, after my second year then, became their head of rugby as well.
So you just mentioned then, so you went to the prep school and to the senior school. What was that transition like back then compared to what it is now?
It's pretty. I was fortunate enough to have a Millfield education. My mum and dad were heavily involved with working at the senior school. My dad was my parents were house parents. My dad was the head of year. My mum ran the medical centre. So through that, I had the opportunity to come here. And for me, it was pretty seamless, really. I lived in a boarding house at the senior school, so I knew the campus up there pretty well. So it was a pretty seamless process. The assessment process has changed. You had to then do common entrance. Now we have our follow-through assessments, so our continuous curriculum, which I think is better for our students. But that's probably the major change.
So what kind of inspired you to embark on a career in education? You mentioned your parents were house parents. Does that have anything to do with it, do you think?
Yeah, my dad never pushed me towards an education, working in education. But I think that just a couple of people I didn't find school easy. You know, I wasn't a high flyer. My sister was. She was 2 years older than me. She was head girl at the senior school. I obviously loved the sport and would probably rather spent a lot more time on the sports field than in the classroom. But I did do my qualifications and got the necessary qualification I needed. But there was just a couple of people who made a big, they invested time in me, they invested their skills to enable me to succeed and to make a success of what I wanted to do. And I thought, if I could do that for one person, then I would imagine I'd be then working a very fulfilling job. And I don't know if I've ever had that impact on anyone, but I definitely enjoy trying that in my role here at Millfield Prep School now.
So who were those people that kind of devoted time
There was an English teacher. I didn't find English easy. The English teacher called Judith Wakeham, who just approached it in a totally different way. My sports coaches, it would give you huge opportunities. There was a teacher here, who I was then very fortunate to come back to then call a colleague and a friend, Sarah Champion, who just seemed to have time for everybody. Nothing was too much trouble, and she would have had her own ups and downs in her own life, but, nothing was too much trouble, and she invested. There was always people first in whatever she did, and that's the sort of attitude I try and take as well. I'm not sure I always get it right, but I always try and put the pupil at the forefront of every decision or every opportunity I try to create, really.
Oh, I think that's very important. So just taking a step back from work, kind of what are your interests and hobbies outside of...
Well, rugby, I suppose, is my passion. I played rugby up until I was too old to be able to roll out on a Saturday afternoon. So played at school, played at university, was able to play. So my first job, we had Saturday morning fixtures, so I was able to play for the local club in sort of Surrey and London South East 1 League. And then I think it's the sort of usual transition. Your rugby career ends, and then I ended up being drawn into playing a bit of golf. So then, but I struggled to get my handicap down low enough to make it seriously. But I still, give it a bit of a whack now and again. But sport, theatre. My dad's a massive theatre lover. He's a massive reader. I haven't had the reading bug as much as him, but definitely enjoyed going to the cinema and the theatre to catch up on things like that.
Do you think that it's quite nice then at a school like Millfield Prep, and we've got loads of kind of stuff going on theatre-wise and sport-wise, that you can kind of still fulfil your passions in that?
Yeah, definitely. Sense? I spent 6 years as a head of year, and I enjoy every role I've had, but that was a really, really fulfilling time in my career here, because you're looking at the child holistically, you're looking at everything that they do, you're not isolating on one thing, and I think it's so important that me as a member of staff here, take the time to go and support what my colleagues are doing, because you see a totally different side of it. I mean, I went to watch the year 8, or not the year 8, year 7 and 8 play twice, just because I wanted to see both casts, and you see individuals come alive and you think, oh, that's just a totally different character, and I think that's hugely, hugely important that you see that. And when I was a head of year, you'll have a responsibility for the discipline of that year group, whereas if you can also say, well, I need to pick you up on this, but what an amazing job you did doing A, B or C, it shows that individual that the reason you're disciplining them is because you care for them, but you're still going to emphasise the positives wherever possible.
Is that why it's quite nice, like I said, at Millfield, that we've got kind of, you have your pupils who like their sport, but also they have opportunities to do drama, to do dance, and they can excel in all different types of
and I think it's hugely important that we educate the children, and sometimes maybe the parents, that it's important they have a broad base. It's not just sport, it's not just academic, it's not just music, it's not just drama, it's just art. These are their formative years, they're like sponges. They need to be dipping their toe in all those activities, because until they've tried it, they don't know if they're going to, 1, like it, and 2, be successful at it. So we have to give them as many opportunities as we can, and then help them, cajole them, encourage them to take those opportunities.
Definitely. So I know how many years have you worked at the prep school for?
I thought you'd asked me that question, so I did have a quick. So this is my 24th year teaching. So I started here in September 1999. So I've done 23 years as a teacher. I'm in my 24th, and I then did 8 years as a pupil, 3 years at the prep school and 5 years at the senior school.
So can you give us an overview of your time teaching here? So kind of
how it's been. In September 99, I was employed as head of ICT. That was my role. They just moved into the new teaching block where we're based now, so it was a brand new department, and I was taking over from a very experienced head of ICT, but was then asked to look at the curriculum and see if we could develop it and enhance it. So that's what I did. I did that role solely. On top of that, I was a group tutor and I was coaching some sport. I did that for 5 or 6 years, and then there was an opportunity to go and become a head of year. The current post holder was retiring, so I then stepped in to be head of year, still doing my ICT role alongside. I did that for 6 years, and I said earlier, thoroughly enjoyed that, because you're looking at all parts of the children's lives, not just isolating on their ICT or their sport, which was hugely rewarding as a member of staff. Then there was a slight restructure, so I actually was head of year 6, which was in those days was a transition year group from the juniors to the seniors, so it was a standalone year group. That's now joined with the juniors, so we have a head of juniors and a head of year 7 and 8, so that role became sort of non-existent. So I then had a few years where I was just back to head of ICT, but I was also helping with some digital assessments and setting up those processes. Had a year as senior tutor, which meant looking after the monitors, the year 8s, running their programme, organising the year 8 programme post their assessments, and then more recently in the last sort of 12 months become head of Co-Curricular, which is a developing role. I've been overseeing all our clubs and activities, but then making sure that every area of the school has a fair crack at the whip when they want to do something. So the drama, if they need some space, or music needs some areas, into the time scale, then we can hopefully work with sport and other areas of the school to make that happen.
So as head of co-curricular now, I guess you kind of see everything that the school offers. Are you often surprised when you look at it, kind of how many clubs and groups there are here?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, I'm in the process now of drawing up next term's clubs. I'm also in the process of looking at next term's calendar, and the opportunities are huge. And you just, as I said earlier, you just hope that the pupils will dip their toe in as many of those opportunities, because, as I said before, unless you try it, you don't know if you're going to like it or be successful. So I really think that's really important, that we as staff, group tutors, heads of year, everyone really pushes them to explore.
Because you recently, since I've been here, you started the tech club, and was that pupil-led? Did they want to find out more, so then you kind of said, well, we can try and do this and
yeah,
this?
We were very fortunate that Parents and Friends a number of years ago bought us some really nice equipment, and that was led by the previous head of English, but then for a period of time it wasn't being used, and a colleague, Mr. Haddock, and I thought we would see if we could get that equipment being used and find if there was a group of students who were interested in doing that, and it's been great. I mean, we've looked at the equipment, the camera equipment, the sound, the lighting. This term we've been concentrating on some stop motion animations, so they were creating little stop motion animations, and last week I know Mr. Haddock was doing some green screens with them so they could then put backgrounds in the background. So it's just showing them that, again, another, being creative in a different field, really.
So what is it about the prep school that's made you stay? What is it the kind of thing that's made you almost...
Well, I mean, I've just explained my my potted history there. I mean, I've had lots of different roles. I mean, obviously I've always been involved in ICT, and I think that subject lends itself to change, because, what I'm teaching now, I wasn't teaching 15 years ago. Some of the stuff didn't even exist then. We iPads, what we've introduced, and so that's always refreshing, because you're updating the scheme of work, you're looking at new technologies. But also, I've had many different roles across most areas of the school. In my first 2 years, I was a liaison officer in the boarding house, so I had a boarding input there, small boarding input, but an input. So yeah, just different challenges. And to be honest, it's a lovely place to work. The facilities are great, you're looked after, and the children do keep you young. I still enjoy coming into work on a daily basis, which I think is important.
It's incredibly important. What is your best memory of the school?
Was that as a pupil or as a member of staff?
I will do staff. I know you've been there. You said 20.
There's some amazing. I mean, the perform. I mean, I remember my dad was involved with the senior school. He's involved with drama, and I think if 20 years ago you said that I'd be involved in any form of being involved in putting on productions here, he wouldn't believe it. But in year 6, for the 6 years that I was head of year 6, we always put on a big year 6 production in the summer term, and that was hugely rewarding, because it was everybody in the year group involved, and the staff. It was a whole team effort. The whole year 6 team were involved, and it was phenomenal. And so seeing that, I've been lucky enough to go on a number of sports tours. I've organised 2 recently, but I've been to South Africa, I've been to Dubai and Abu Dhabi on a number of occasions. Seeing the boys out and about representing Millfield, having a positive experience, learning about rugby, because they were primarily rugby tours, but also learning to develop as individuals in different cultures. Really rewarding.
Now, I know you've been here for quite some time, so I thought I'd ask around to get a few stories. And Dan Close, someone you're familiar with, told me to mention Dubai, the trip you just said then, about a lost passport. Yeah. Would you care to explain the context?
I'm not sure how much of this story I'm allowed to tell, but one of the boys inadvertently didn't quite listen to the instructions they were given on the plane, and they had these jackets that we had, and they had a big zip compartment in the front, and as they showed their passport, they were asked to put it in there and then not take it out until they departed the plane. This one individual decided to put it in the glove compartment, the seat in front of him, and then left the plane with his passport still there. So at one point we thought one of us was not even going to get through customs in Dubai airport and was going to be getting them back on the next plane back to the UK. But luckily, Mr. Close, initially, he had to surrender his own passport, and then we had some influential old Millfieldians in that area of the world who were able to help us to secure a new British passport before we left.
So lots of eventful trips then you've had.
Yeah, some great trips. Yeah, really. And as I said, hard work to pull them together, and when you're out there, but hugely rewarding when you see the students. You see the best of them, to be honest.
So I know you said earlier, teachers who inspired you when you were in school. Has there been any staff whilst you've worked here that you've kind of become fond of and learnt from?
Yeah, I mentioned Sarah Champion, who I was fortunate enough to be taught by, and then was able to call a colleague and a friend. She's an amazing individual. As I said, always put children at the forefront of everything she did. Staff I've worked closely with when I was head of year, we had a really, really good head of year team. So Miss McConnell, who's still head of year 8, Mrs Henderson was head of year 7 at the time, and then you had Mrs Cookson and Mrs Bosher, who both did the juniors. You mentioned Mr Close, he started here the year before I did, so we've worked closely together from an academic point of view and driving forward change in the ICT curriculum, the introduction of iPads we were both heavily involved with, but also on the rugby field. So nearly all of the tours, bar the last couple, he and I have been on those together with Dave Hill, who's retired now. And then with my sort of pastoral role as online safety, worked really, really closely with the previous Deputy Head Pastoral, Tracy Hazel, for 10 years, or 10, 11 years when she was here. And that, we have the same, fortunately we had the same philosophy on education, and we were able to work really, really closely together. And obviously, management team here has changed recently, but I'm really, really looking forward to continuing that with Ben Hilton, the Deputy Head Pastoral, and I think Dan Thorburn, the head. We're in a good, safe pair of hands there, and he's going to drive the school forward. So hopefully, if they see fit, be involved in that process of continuing to improve what we offer our children.
And I know you summarised kind of throughout this podcast key parts, but could you explain a bit more about the key parts of your role that you have now? So co-curricular and ICT, what do you?
So computing and ICT is just delivering the curriculum. So I'm in charge of the schemes of work for the pre-prep and the juniors and year 6, 7 and 8. So it varies year on year which year groups I teach, but so it's keeping abreast of change in technology and what becomes available. I'm fortunate enough to be part of what's called the IT management group, which is a cross-school group. Myself and Mr Close sit on that, representing the prep school. We meet with Mr Gary Henderson, who's the director of IT, at the senior school. Stuart Mallock, he does the digital education at the senior school, and other members of SMT up there. So we strategise and put suggestions forward to the management team there. And then the co-curricular is a new, as I said, new evolving role. But it's just looking at what we offer in all spheres. Obviously, Joe Morgan-Hughes, I should have mentioned Joe about people I've worked with Joe Morgan-Hughes really, really closely as well, but he looks after the sport. But it's just making sure that the other areas of the school are on a level playing field with those, and making sure that they have the opportunity to resources, to staff, to funding where appropriate, really.
And do you have a particular philosophy in terms of education? So how you view the school and how you approach teaching?
I don't know that it's because I've been so involved in Millfield, being educated in most of my teaching life here, but I think the Boss Myers philosophy is one that we should all follow. Everybody will have a talent. It's just giving them the opportunity to find that. I also think it's really important as educators that we don't set the ceiling on child's development and potential. Let them set it. So make sure that they are always thriving to get better. Don't judge them too early. And I think I take this from Sarah Champion, is I try and put the child at the forefront of every decision or change or suggestion I make. I'm not saying I always get that right, and I'm sure there'll be people who say that I've got it wrong in the past, and I'm happy to admit that, because, you know, as we say to the kids, making mistakes see it as a positive. As long as you learn from it and you don't continue to make that mistake, then us as adults have to live that life as well, and realise that we're not going to get it right all the time, and that we have to be able to be big enough and bold enough to say, actually, I got that wrong, and I'm happy to say that. But yeah, it's got to be child-centred, it's got to be pupil-focused, and making sure that we look to get the best out of them at every opportunity we can.
So you've got the child kind of at the forefront of their own education. What values do you try and instill in the pupils to try and teach them? I know we have got the school values, but is there anything that
I think the most important school value is be kind. That underpins most of what we do. Honesty is hugely important to me. As I just said, people are going to make mistakes, but you have to own those mistakes. You have to be honest. You have to accept that you've done that, and then we can move forward and step forward from that. And have a go attitude. Don't accept the average. Stretch yourself, challenge yourself, and really, you know, reach as high as you can. You, as I said, you set the ceiling, not us.
Definitely. So can you tell us a bit about how the prep school is organised? So for prospective families, giving them an overview of kind of what we offer aspiring pupils.
So we obviously have a pre-prep department. I oversee their curriculum, but I don't get overly involved in the teaching and learning up there. And then from year 3 upwards, so year 3 to 6 are our juniors, led by Miss Newman, and then you have a year 7 and a year 8. And that's the structure there. You have boarding houses, games houses that you could belong to as well, but that's the main structure. And you can join the school at any point. You know, there's not a set entry point into Millfield Prep School. Pupils do join across the age range there.
So if you were going to join Millfield Prep, let's say today as a child, is there anything you'd like to try now that you didn't maybe when you were here?
Yeah, definitely. One of my biggest regrets is my parents tried exceptionally hard to get me to learn a musical instrument, and I didn't buy into it. And I just think that would be a wonderful skill to have now, especially when I was head of year. So if I wanted to have a piece of music played in the year assembly, I had to then ask a colleague. Well, imagine if I was been able to just sit there and get the piano out and tickle the old ivories or blow a trumpet. Or I've tried the saxophone in later life, but unfortunately I can't read the music. So it seemed to make a sound. I'm not sure if it was a good sound, but it made a sound. But yeah, that was one of them. So yes, you know, and I suppose it goes back to everything, you know. Just because I was sporty doesn't mean I shouldn't have then gone to... No, Mr. Maxwell, Pete Maxwell's been here a long time. I said to him, I can't draw. He says, yes, you can. He said, you just don't draw. You know, you just need to invest some time in it and stuff like that. So it's those, more the creative sides, really, the music, the drama. I didn't get on the stage until I was at the senior school. I think I did a junior house play when I was about 14, 15. That was my first foray onto a stage. I enjoyed it. Again, it was with mates. It was the camaraderie. It was the teamwork. It was amazing. But yeah, definitely the creative side, I wish I'd invested more time and listened to my parents when they said, yeah, you need to learn your scales and those sort of things.
What instrument would it have been? You said
piano.
Piano?
That was what I was doing, was piano.
Yeah.
As I said, since there was a member of staff who was here in my early days, he was a saxophonist, so I did try. I did get some sound out of it, but I don't know what it was. But yeah, I mean, something like, I think I could probably blow quite well, people would say, wouldn't they? So being a big chap, I think a tuba or a saxophone might be quite good.
Well, I look forward to hearing you play it.
I did actually, the year 6s used to play, I think they still do, they have a course on the ukulele. So one of the spring concerts, I spent an hour with the guitar teacher and learned the 4 chords.
Yeah.
So when they played in front of their parents, I joined them and played the ukulele. So that's as far as my music goes at the moment.
And I've noticed as well that you've got your favourite spots at the prep school. So
Fordy's bench.
Fordy's bench, yeah. I've named it. Is that just something you've kind of you like spending break time?
Yeah, I do, and it's in the centre of the school, and I often need to catch either a member of staff or catch a pupil. So I sit there if I can 10-15 minutes of a lunchtime and just watch, and I'm a bit of a people watcher, so see what's going on. You pick up on things, but you can then catch people and chat, and some of the pupils call it Mr. Ford's bench, as you say. The staff call it Fordy's bench. Interestingly, there's a tree that was taken down the bottom by the pond. One thing I did do when I was a pupil here, we were allowed to climb trees, and I tell the pupils probably the reason you're not allowed to climb trees now is because of me, because I inadvertently fell out. We used to jump from one to the other, and I inadvertently fell out of a tree and broke both my radius and ulna on my wrist. But I see that tree that I fell out of has recently had to be taken down for some reason. So I have challenged the grounds and garden to see if they can turn the big trunk that's still there into a proper Fordy's bench. So we'll see if that's going to be come to fruition.
Well, and I've seen you sometimes the bench is there for the rugby. I know you're coaching the rugby sevens now. How is that going? I know.
Yeah, I mean, I coached the under 12s this year. I was fortunate to coach the current year 8s. The year 8s are looking really strong. The year 7s are working really, really hard. Their skill levels are good. So year 7 is very much a developmental process for their 7s. But they have won one tournament. They've got our own tour. We've got our own tournament coming up in a couple of Saturdays' time. We've got international for the first time. So for the first time we've got an international school linked into our last tour. We've got Dubai College who are coming over for Roslyn Park. So we're going to come and play in our tournament. So that'll be the highlight for those boys, especially year 7s. And then the year 8s go to Roslyn Park soon after that. So and hopefully I believe we might have an ex-New Zealand 7s player in school on Monday going to run a coaching session for the boys, which would be great. So we try and do that. We tie into some of our old boys. Got a good number of our old boys playing at Bath now who come down and lead some sessions for us, which is great. Yeah.
And at Millfield Prep, we have pupils who excel in all sorts of different disciplines, whether that's kind of sport, music, academic. You mentioned that you're involved in the pastoral side. How do you ensure that pupils get the pastoral support when they've got loads of sessions in a week or a quite busy schedule?
Yeah, I mean, we early every year we try and talk to the students. Even when I'm doing some online safety stuff with them in September, we always talk about them having a trusted adult that they can speak to, and that could be anybody. That could be their group tutor, it could be a coach, it could be matron in boarding houses, but it's just making sure they have that person they feel they can have that conversation with, and it's just about making yourself available. I mean, another reason I sit on the bench, most of the children know I'm there, so if they want to come and have a chat and sit on the bench and talk, something might be worrying them, or they might tell me their good news, then we just, as staff, we just try and we have this open door policy where we try and make ourselves as accessible to them as they need us, really.
Definitely. And are there any success stories that you're particularly proud of that you've been involved in? I know you said year 6 production when you had a year.
Year 6 production.
Is there any other standouts?
It's great, seeing boys that you've coached playing rugby to a high level. So we've got Josh Bayliss, who's at Bath, is in the Scotland squad at the moment. And lovely thing for me is going to watch. I try to go and watch them a couple of times a season. My good friend who I was at the senior school with, John Mallett, he's director of rugby at the senior school, so we've known each other for years, and I try and go and watch his team play a couple of times a year, and to see for me, that if they've got a first 15 at the senior school, it's got 7 or 8, so they had an unbeaten season last year. They had 7 or 8 boys from the prep school in their starting 15. From a prep school rugby programme point of view, that's success.
Yeah.
That year may not have won every game they played. That's irrelevant at the time because that's not the end of their career. Playing first 15 rugby is their end of their Millfield career, and then you go and get them to go on even further and see that it's great. So so that's really rewarding. But seeing children do well in assessments, pupils that find things challenging, be able to find the avenue and the path to navigate their learning process through those. There's so many, they're daily occurrences here. See people having challenges, but then succeeding is hugely. It's the most rewarding part of the fortunate job that you have.
Definitely. And what are you looking forward to at Millfield Prep? Are there any significant events coming out? I know you said Rosslyn Park.
Yeah, Rosslyn will be good. It's a slightly different festival than it used to be, but it'll be a wonderful opportunity for the students. As I said, we've got a new management team in place here. I'm really looking forward to working with them and to drive the school forward. We've had a successful year on a number of spheres already, with awards, and that's not just the current management team. You've got to remember that a lot of that work was put in by the previous management team as well. But now we've just got to move forward and develop and keep striving for excellence, or as our value would say, be brilliant in as many areas as we can. And Mr. Thorburn has sent the pupils and the staff the challenge of just being a little bit better every day. And if you can do that, I think what the product that we provide to our pupils and their parents will only get better.
So, final question. If you could sum up Millfield Prep in 3 main takeaways, what would they be?
From a personal point of view, life-changing. I mean, the opportunities I had as a pupil to come through Millfield changed my outlook on life and changed my desire to succeed in different areas. Opportunity. The opportunities that the students have is phenomenal, and as I've probably said it 3 or 4 times during this chat, is that we just hope that they take those opportunities, and probably family, because we're a big organisation, but we're still close, if that makes sense. It sounds that those two don't go together, but we are still very family orientated as a staff, as a community. Everyone's got each other's backs, and we look after each other, and I think that's really important. I suppose also the family could go back to my own experience of my family's long association with the school. My dad taught the singing school for over 30 years. I suppose that's my challenge. Can I last longer than can I beat my dad? But I mean, he's been a huge inspiration to me, and my mum has been so supportive as well. So, from me, life-changing, opportunity and family would probably be the 3 that I would probably pick at the moment.
I think that's the perfect way to end the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Millfield Way Podcast in conversation with Jonathan Ford. Thank you.